welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Nearly 100 people are dead and dozens are missing after torrential rains and landslides linked to Cyclone Ditwah have devastated 20 districts across Sri Lanka, leaving nearly 200,000 people affected. The European Union says that a high-profile corruption probe in Ukraine shows Kyiv's anti-graft agencies are working after investigators carried out searches targeting President Volodymyr Zelensky's top aide. Britain says talks to join the European Union's defense fund SAFE has broken down in a major setback to a much-wanted post-Brexit reset of relations aimed at strengthening the continent's defense. The United Nations states that the killing of 2 Palestinians who were shot dead in the West Bank while seemingly surrendering to Israeli forces was an apparent summary execution. US President Donald Trump announces a sweeping set of immigration proposals. He vows to permanently pause migration from all third world countries and launch what he described as reverse migration to restore order in the United States. Russian President Putin meets his Hungarian Prime Minister Orban in Moscow, praising his stance on Ukraine and suggesting Budapest could host talks with the US on the conflict. Orban stresses that Hungary will continue relying on Russian energy despite European Union and US pressure. Donald Trump says the United States will very soon begin action on land to stop suspected Venezuelan drug traffickers. They will soon expand operations beyond maritime strikes amid rising tension and increased US military deployments in the region. Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte will remain in detention at the International Criminal Court after appeals judges reject a request to release him on health grounds. And viewers, let's move on to the top focus story here at World Report. Sri Lanka is reeling from one of its worst weather disasters in years, with nearly 100 people reported dead and dozens still missing as of Friday evening amid relentless rains and strong winds linked to Cyclone Ditwah. Now, the storm is tracking north and northwestward toward Tamil Nadu, while Sri Lanka faces widespread flooding, landslides, and severe infrastructure damage. 20 of the island's 25 districts have been badly hit, affecting over 60,000 families and nearly 200,000 people under a national red alert. The eastern districts of Ampara, Batticaloa, and Trincomalee, along with parts of the central and UVA provinces, including tourist hubs like Kandy and Nuwara Elia, are among the worst impacted. Entire communities have been stranded with flooded roads, collapsing slopes, and harrowing reports of vehicles and families swept away. Schools are closed and government offices shut except for essential services. President Anura Kumara Dissanayake has urged MPs to coordinate relief efforts. We now welcome G. Kumar Chittambaram, who is the Vice General Secretary of Association of Small Medium Tourism Enterprises in Sri Lanka. He's also the Managing Director at Travel Wind Holiday in Sri Lanka. I welcome you and thank you for joining us here at NewsX World. Well, firstly, what is the situation really on the ground? We have some reports of the devastation that has been caused by the floods, but you're there in Colombo. Please help us with the perspective with somebody who's there watching it all in person.
Good evening to you all of you all. So, well, I was not only from the Colombo, because I was basically yesterday I was in Kandy and the hill stations, and I saw the the trauma and like the devastations of the damage has been happened in the most part of the Sri Lanka, especially the hill country area, and also the north central provinces and the central provinces is badly affected with the landslides and the road. Lot of places the roads was really damaged, as well as the bridges was all gone washed away in certain part of Sri Lanka. So the traffic coming like the transportation mode has a bit of a standstill in certain places. Now I mean the main cities connectivity is also a bit of a risk because of the most of the roads networks has been like flooded with more the tank waters and the river waters and the canal waters has been flowing. So the government of Sri Lanka and the I mean like we call is Road Development Authority and the armed forces and the police people got involved and like clean up these the respective area and trying to bring back the traffic movements and the like the vehicular movements to get back into the normal position. So the people are not traveling at the moment. I mean, like the general people are just stuck at the moment. They are not making any travel around in the country. But the essential services needed to be transportation things to be done. So that has to be happening. But like mainly the vegetables and things like that comes from the hill station. That's got standstill at this stage at the moment. So the petroleum and the social stuffs are already distributing and going on. So government is the president and the disaster management team and the forces got involved and like they are given the task to help and especially to evacuate the people where the earth slides happening. So the people have been moved out from that certain area and bring down to the safest place and keep them with the food and lodging is will be provided by the government agents at this stage.
All right. How much time do you think the rescue operations are going to take, and in how long will roads and infrastructure be restored? Also, if you can tell us about the immediate needs of the people.
Well, at the stage, at the moment, the shelter is the most important. Safe shelter, that's most important. And the government is doing that. Like they're bringing them into the welfare places and the schools and the closest community hall and the safe, most safely and especially the main sanitations and the accommodations and the hygienic things have been looked at by the healthcare and they're doing that. So mostly it's like the most dangerous places only they identified and evacuating and bring them back also. Some of the areas are like very still dangerous. I mean like especially the hill countries and also the low level areas also because of the water level from the rivers has been flown up and that the river is now there is a red alert is given closer to the Ganga of Kalani, which is come from the hill and joining in closer to the Colombo city area. So this called Kalani. So that surroundings those areas also been informed that evacuate because the water flow is high rising and also that's concern on the Colombo city. I mean it's not in the city but like the that build the river bed is going out about like 8 to 10 kilometers away from the city. So the surrounding of that area, people being evacuated and asked to move out because the water flow is so high. So the government is doing at this stage to make sure that people's safety and keep on the awareness. But very unfortunate incident because in most part of the twin, as per the electricity board of Sri Lanka is announced, nearly about 25% to 30% of the people don't have electricity at this stage. So they cannot restore it at this for the next 24 hours because of the wind and a lot of trees are falling onto the main line and they just especially in like in Kandy and Matale, Badul area has been the electricity has been so there is not much of communication is happening on the mobiles so because people cannot do the charging and things like that. But like the mainly for the essential item like hospitals and the ambulance services, fire sites, all those places and the supermarkets, they have their own generator and they are generating the electricity at this stage. And the government is also supplying for the hospitals.
All right. Thank you for joining us for now and helping us understand the situation there and the need of the hour. And viewers, with that, we shift our focus now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that his chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, has resigned from his post after anti-corruption officials raided his residence and offices earlier in the day. Now, about a dozen officials from National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office conducted the search before dawn in Kyiv's highly secure government quarter, the agency said in a joint statement. The development is likely to further weaken Zelensky at a pivotal moment for Ukraine. Keith Vaz, who's the former Britain minister, now joins us here into the discussion. All right. Thank you, Mr. Vaz, for joining us here on NewsX World. Now, firstly, how do you see the meeting between the Hungary Prime Minister and Russia?
Well, I think this is a surprise development, but there has always been a strong move to make sure corruption is removed from Ukraine. So I'm not surprised at the recent story that you mentioned. In respect to the bigger picture, what we are waiting for is a meaningful meeting between Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Volodymyr Zelensky. That is the only way this matter is going to be resolved. And the Ukrainians have made it very, very clear that they are not going to concede any land. If they do, it means that Russia can just, or any other country, can grab anyone else's land, and at the end of the day, you don't have to give it back. So we're waiting for that. There is a peace plan on the table, and it's important that that is discussed as quickly as possible.
All right. I also want to take some breaking news development that we're learning about the resignation of. Can I have my guest back into the discussion here? Mr. Vaz, I wanted to ask you about the resignation of Yermak, Zelensky's aide, who's quit amid the anti-grafter charges and prosecution of him. Do you think this is really weakening Ukraine's cause, and if it's going to completely destroy Zelensky's efforts?
It is going to weaken the cause, because when countries like the UK and America give money to Ukraine, they want it spent on Ukraine. They don't want it to be involved in any corruption scandals or any problems. So what the president seems to be doing is he wants to clean out the stable. He wants to make sure that there is no hint that any of the money is ending up in the wrong hands. So on the one hand, of course, when it is announced, when you have your chief of staff being arrested, this is a very serious matter. But on the other hand, there's only one person who can bring this war to an end. That is Volodymyr Zelensky working with Putin, President Putin and President Trump. So there can be no question that he should be removed himself from what is happening. He's clearing out the stable. People have said for a long time that there is an issue of corruption in Ukraine. And the fact that the police in Ukraine have made an arrest of this very, very important individual, the chief of staff to the president, is a very important consideration.
All right, Mr. Vaz, do you think the statements that have also come from Zelensky are now much of a damage control attempt?
Well, of course, he wants to show that he is acting strongly to root out corruption. I'm sure this is not going to be the only case we're going to hear about. His eyes needs to be, however, on that big picture. There is a peace plan that is on the table. That plan needs to include the president of Russia and the president of the United States, because the United States are funding this war. Without them, we can't have peace. And without President Putin, we can't have peace. So all three have got to sit together at a table. I think this will happen. You know, I'm not one of the greatest fans of Donald Trump, but one of the things he has done is he's shown incredible leadership. Whether he's right or wrong, he makes a decision. And I think that's what people want. And as this war limbers on and people die every single day, Donald Trump has made it very clear he wants peace. And this is the right road forward. So clearing out the stable, making sure corruption is removed, is an essential part of that peace process. Yes, it will be damaged today and tomorrow, but then after that, the big picture is peace in Ukraine.
All right, do stay on with us, Mr. Vaz, as we have some more inputs to give our viewers. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said that he hoped for ongoing peace proposals to result in a ceasefire and lasting peace following a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Orban added that Hungary has not given up any area of cooperation with Russia, signaling continued engagement despite growing pressure from the European Union and the US to reduce reliance on Russian energy. Listen into what he said.
El fogom mondani önnek azt, amit a korábbi találkozónkon is elmondtam, hogy Magyarország érdekelt a békében.
Скажу также то, что говорил вам на нашей предыдущей встрече. Венгрия заинтересована в мире.
És hogy nagyon reméljük, hogy az asztalon fekvő béke javaslatok elvezetnek a fegyverszünethez és békét. És nem is adtunk fel az együttműködésből semmilyen területet, semmilyen külső nyomásra.
In fact, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz also said that it is increasingly urgent to use frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. Speaking at a press conference in Berlin with the Slovenian Prime Minister Robert Golob, Merz emphasized that Ukraine needs European backing as the Russian attacks intensify and winter sets in. He expressed hope that the European Union could reach a joint solution soon. Last month, European Union leaders attempted to finalize a plan to use 140 billion euros in frozen Russian sovereign assets as a loan for Kyiv, but the effort failed to gain Belgium's support. Let's listen into what Merz said.
Wir versuchen eine gemeinsame Lösung in der Europäischen Union hinzubekommen. Ich habe ja vor dem letzten Rat den Vorschlag gemacht, mit einem solchen Darlehen auf die Vermögenswerte Russlands die Ukraine auch für die nächsten 3 Jahre zu finanzieren. Ich sehe die Notwendigkeit, dies zu tun, immer dringlicher. Die Ukraine braucht unsere Unterstützung. Die russischen Angriffe nehmen zu. Der Winter steht bevor oder wir sind im Winter. Und insofern hoffe ich, dass wir hier zu einer gemeinsamen Lösung in der Europäischen Union kommen. Die Androhung von Russland, die ist uns nicht unbekannt. Das ist ein wiederkehrendes Ritual. Wir lassen uns davon nicht beeindrucken. Wir müssen alles tun, um wirklich zu einem Ende dieses Krieges zu tun. Und dafür ist der Einsatz der russischen Vermögenswerte aus meiner Sicht heraus wirklich ein angemessenes und richtiges Instrument. Aber noch einmal, wir suchen nach einer gemeinsamen Lösung mit dem belgischen Staat, auch mit Euroclear, damit dies wirklich auch im großen Konsens in der Europäischen Union beschlossen wird.
Let's welcome back Mr. Keith Vaz, the former Britain Minister, into the discussion here. He joins us live from London. Thank you for staying on with us, Mr. Vaz. Now, clearly there's a divide within the European Union over the use of frozen Russian sovereign assets, while there's Germany that's urging those assets to be used. Belgium is warning against it. Do you think the use of these assets is even viable to begin with, and if it's even a possibility?
Well, the assets have been there for some time. Personally, I'm against the seizure of assets of an individual or a country where there has not been due process. Passing a resolution in the European Parliament is not due process. I can see why Chancellor Merkel wants to use this money and these assets, but actually they're not his. They belong to the Russian people and the Russian government. But of course, Europe is running out of money, and therefore the first thing they want to do is seize these assets and use it against Russia itself. That is why I think it's important that we get to the end process, which is peace in Ukraine. Unless we do that, this kind of activity is going to carry on. As far as Viktor Orban is concerned, I think the Prime Minister of Hungary is very close to President Putin, and he is very dependent on the oil and gas that comes from Russia. So Trump has given him, in a sense, a carte blanche to carry on with this. So you have one European country that is accepting fuel from Russia and other European countries wanting to sanction Russia. This can't be right. I mean, the EU has to speak with one voice. That's the point of the EU, where you get all these countries working together. So I hope very much that this will be resolved. But Viktor Orban has always been a slightly different approach.
Yeah.
Or I should say not a slightly different approach, a big different approach to the others.
Well, absolutely, that is evident from his latent statements as well. But thank you for joining us. And viewers, let's now move on. Now we have some news coming in from the United Nations where UN Human Rights Office has expressed concern over comments made by Israel's National Security Minister, who backed the Israeli troops involved in the shooting deaths of 2 Palestinians in Jenin. Such statements, which appear to exonerate the use of lethal force, have been condemned as dangerous incitement to violence. The European Union, the United Nations reminded that there are legal and due process mechanisms to deal with suspects, stressing that brutal force is not the solution. The latest figures now show that Israeli forces and settlers have killed over 1,000 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank since early October, including more than 200 children. This is what UN Human Rights spokesperson said. Listen in.
Yesterday's incident, which was caught on film by a TV channel. An internal review was announced, but statements by a senior Israeli government official sought to absolve Israeli security forces of responsibility, raising serious concerns about the credibility of any further review or investigation conducted by an entity that is not fully independent from the government.
And Shaul Sadka, who is a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you for joining us, Shaul, here at NewsX World. Now, do you think the condemnation and the statement that has come in from the United Nations is going to have any impact given the backing that Israel enjoys from the United States?
I don't think the backing of the United States is relevant at all in this situation. Israel's primary rival in the world is neither the United States nor the Palestinians, but rather it is the United Nations itself, which condemns Israel on an almost daily basis. Most of its condemnations in total, the majority of the UN condemnations are against Israel. It is an organization that has been hijacked by various bad actors to be primarily an anti-Israel body. So I don't think anyone in Israel or in the United States takes it seriously in any way. Of course, any alleged crimes committed by Israeli troops in action will be investigated by the competent Israeli authorities. And I'm sure the truth will come out.
Do you think the Security Council resolution of a violation of Palestinian rights of self-determination and UN Charter is going to have any effect? We're seeing how Israel is continuing with its killing. There's no deterring Netanyahu and the IDF.
I absolutely reject the framing. That's not how it's happening at all. On the contrary, Israel is continuing its anti-terror operations throughout the West Bank and beyond. There will be no acceptance by the Israeli public of terror armies armed on their borders, and they will be continually, aggressively dismantled until they surrender. There's going to be no compromise on that issue, and I must reject the framing.
All right. Thank you, Shaul, for joining us here for now. Appreciate you giving us your opinions. And viewers, let's now move on to news from France, where President Emmanuel Macron has said that he wants a fast-track legal procedure that would allow courts to block harmful fake news or defamatory online content within 48 hours. Speaking after a Defense Council meeting on information warfare, Macron said that current systems are far too slow when false or AI-amplified content damages a person's dignity or reputation. He proposed an emergency injunction-style process where victims could quickly ask a judge to order content removed and pursue further legal action later. The plan arrives amid global concerns that anti-fake news laws can be misused as tools of censorship. Critics warned that vague definitions of misinformation, government control over what counts as false, and platform liability can lead to selective enforcement against journalists or political opponents. Russia's post-2022 fake news laws have been imposed and used to imprison critics of the ongoing war. Even historically, attempts like the US push to block the Pentagon Papers show how governments may try to limit information under the banner of national security. And moving on now, viewers, Senegal's Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko has condemned this week's coup in neighboring Guinea-Bissau, calling it a sham and demanding the continuation of the interrupted election. His comments added to the growing regional outrage over the takeover, which saw military officers remove the civilian government just before election results could be announced. The coup leader, Major General Horta Inta, defended the action, claiming it was necessary to protect Guinea-Bissau's democracy from narco-traffickers seeking to destabilize the country. Inta also announced the start of a one-year transition period to oversee the country's future direction. The West African bloc, ECOWAS, condemned the coup and called for the restoration of constitutional order. The United Nations, African Union, and European Union also voiced strong opposition.
ci wàllu la xaw Guinée boobu duma ci sori parce que dafa relever ci prérogative bu président de la République defe naa démb def nañu communiqué gouvernement CEDEAO def na communiqué waaye la ma ci mën a gàttal rek mooy am na ñun ñëpp sañ-sañ ne nag li xew Guinée ñëpp xam nañ ni combine te tegul fenn te la ca gën a gàtt nag mooy benn nañu yeggali processus ba commission ba wax kan moo gagné ñaar ña ñu jàpp rawatina Domingos Pereira nga xam ne du woon sax candidat ñu jàpp ko ba xañ ko ay médicaments nañ ko bàyyi te delloo ko ay médicaments loolu moom du ma ci sori la ca des nag mbirum CEDEAO ak ñoom seen sama xalaat li ma ci xalaat xam ngeen ko.
And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from across the world.